Hello, Collectivites! This is Acoustic speaking, presenting to you the Wanderstar Report, the internet show all about Collective, the community-created card game. On today's episode of the Wanderstar Report, we take a look at the submissions for Collective's third card back competition. Along with that, we take a look at some wonderful cards, such as Infinitely Scaling 4-drop number 237, a 5-mana 6/7 Duelist, and Local Designer finds out that EXP loss is actually an upside. But without further ado, let's dive in to the week review. Cyber Hammer Mage is a cute card, but it's in an awkward spot on the mana curve. On paper, a 3-mana 3/3 that makes a pretty decent card on entrance sounds like a nice deal. However, in Ashgurdy Aggro, the deck where you'd want to play this is an awful turn 3 play in terms of tempo. The body's lack of evasion means that playing this will usually lock out a turn 3 passive proc, which is crucial for Ashgurdy's game plan. The effect also isn't substantial enough to be worth playing later in the game, leading it to feeling very inflexible. Honestly, this might be better off as a 2-mana 2/2 to allow for some more flexibility in play lines, because right now it's a bit too awkward to use properly. Snowball Snipe sucks big time. This card has 2 modes, neither of them good. 1 mana to exhaust a unit compares poorly to cards like Viper Strike, and 1 mana to deal 2 damage to an exhausted unit is a much worse Twin Kunai toss. A card with multiple modes means nothing if none of the modes are worth using. This could be buffed in a variety of ways, but right now it's simply just not worth running. For being a flavor-first design, Wisp Hunter Squad is actually quite competent. Essentially, this is a meta-specific tech card that hits specifically powerful neutral units. Currently, there are a few targets for this, such as Friendly Axolotl, and with more cards should come more targets. Funnily enough, if this becomes popular, it also attacks against itself due to also being a neutral unit. This can also hit Kyungmi during levels 1 and 6 for what that's worth. Overall, the card's meta impact is uncertain and will fluctuate based on the meta relevancy of neutral units in times to come. Yes, this is a 5-mana 6/7 Duelist. Obviously, this is ridiculously overcurved by all measures. At 5 mana, this trades up with nearly everything up to 8 mana, and in most of those cases, it'll survive to potentially duel another unit. There is currently an update on the subreddit to make this 6 mana, which is honestly where it should be. What else do you want me to say about this? It's a French vanilla with too many stat points. Simple as. Motion to present is weird. At base, for 1 mana, this lets you selectively mill one of the top 4 cards of your deck, which currently lacks the enablers to make this sort of effect worthwhile. With the Surge, however, the mill turns into a draw with a discount attached, which is a bit better. Currently, most people will probably exclusively use the Surge form of the card in some sort of mid-range list, since drawing a 6-drop with this lets you play it on turn 4. Maybe the base form will be relevant at some point, but for now at least, the Surge form seems pretty strong if you can build your deck for it. I don't care for Lizaboy Nest, personally. The nest itself is quite passive, but it makes the aforementioned Lizaboys each time it takes damage, which could make it useful as a blocker in some strength decks. Is what I would say if you weren't able to just run this in Kyungmi, using the strength out of its effect to turn this into a 1/3 duelist that makes more duelists each time it duels. This, I think, is unreasonable, and I expect the card to become exclusive at some point in the future. Mark Shadow is another card for the Hollow archetype, and with this, we're 3 for 3 on incredibly strong spirit staples. At base, this is actually overcurved, since ignoring any synergy, this is a 3-mana 3/2 that makes another 3/2 on death, or possibly even bigger. Merc Shadow also adds scaling to hollows, and really early in the game at that. Personally, I'd be more okay with this if the card was scaled up to a 4-drop, since at 3, it could cause hollows to snowball too quickly, as more cards to generate them are added to the game. Displacing Winds is a very interesting board wipe. On the surface, the card looks overcurved as hell, paying 1 mana to deal 1 damage to all enemy units, blowing Acid Rain out of the water. However, this comes with the caveat of the card being unable to actually kill units, merely returning them to the opponent's hand. This factor actually makes it worse against boards of cheap units, since the opponent can just play them again, retriggering any summon or entrance effects for little cost. However, this downside could occasionally work in your favor in terms of denying enemy entombs. I suspect this is less of a super busted control card, and more of a board clearing tool that aggro can run to combat other aggro decks, where the card's downside is at its most minimal. Either way, I'm excited to see how this card's performance unfolds. Elder Scribe is filler. For all intents and purposes, this is an upscaled book brawler, which is not a good thing. The self-buffing effect is rarely likely to ever go off, since there are few situations where you can safely play a basic scroll without going so far behind in tempo as to not just lose the game on the spot. Maybe if basic scrolls as a token were better than they are currently, this could see play somewhere, but right now, this is no foreseeable niche. Testify is an interesting tech card. It's pretty much at peace at home, losing the life gain effect, but in exchange, it costs 0. This allows it to be more easily used when situations requiring this sort of effect do come up, but the lack of other effects can leave it dead in the hand most of the time. This definitely feels like a card you put in a sideboard if we had one of those, though maybe a 0-cost action by itself could be useful for something in the future. Black Hole is funky. The effect itself is woefully inconsistent due to picking from the entire card pool of units, leading to a lot of off-affinity cards or other dud choices. So, using this as a way to get consistently strong units is ill-advised, even now when the selection pool is at its smallest. However, this could see some use in Fortuno, as it shares the distinction with Mind Electric for being the only cards that allow you to proc your passive on turn 1. Even then, the card seems niche at best even now, and will only continue to fall off as the card pool expands. I don't know how to feel about indecisive shoppers. To be honest, I'm not sure I can really evaluate this yet, since the card does next to nothing right now. Sure, you can use the surge effect, but that's not nearly enough to get good utility out of this, especially since the active requires you to store a card as part of the cost. Maybe this does something when we get more cards that interact with store and fetch, but for now this is just waiting for support cards to actually be useful. I'm not so sure how to feel about this week. On one hand, we have 2 cards that are just blatantly overcurved in Pitbot and Merc Shadow. On the other hand, we do have some cards that manage to be both powerful and interesting, with Displacing Winds and Motion to Present. However, the rest of the week doesn't really wow me. You got a lot of very simple designs that are either mediocre or just straight up bad. Overall, the week isn't super exciting aside from these picks. Maybe the next week will be better. Let's see what we have to look forward to by looking at the collective subreddit, past and present. Oh look, another 4-mana infinitely scaling duelist. Anyway, Glitter Diver scales proportionally to the amount of cards you add to your hand each turn, up to 2. Personally, I don't care for Dive as a trigger. It procs way too easily, which requires the triggered effect to be minuscule in power, or to place massive limits on how many times it can activate, and at that point it feels redundant to even use Dive over any other trigger word. As for this card, this is massively feast or famine. Either your opponent kills it immediately and you suffer a massive tempo blowout, or they don't and this scales out of control. Overall, I'm just not a fan of this type of design, which is a shame since I love the art. Okay, I have beef with the Powerverse cards, and I've lumped them all together for one reason. They're all cheap, unexclusive units that allow you to lose EXP. These cards can then be running Kyungmi in order to stay at level 1, which is actually advantageous, since before she picks an outfit at level 2, she's a neutral hero, meaning she does not suffer from off-affinity penalty. I don't think I need to explain why being able to run a tricolor deck with no downsides is incredibly game-warping. All of these cards need to be exclusive before I can even consider evaluating their balance, since right now their ability to keep KM neutral is more important than whatever abilities they may actually possess. Wind and Thunder is a somewhat weird card draw tool. For 2 mana, you either get to draw 2 cards, or get a Malice Bolt that doesn't discard. Currently, I think the strength of the effects are a bit lopsided. Namely, drawing an extra card is going to be worth more than the 2 damage in most cases. This leads to the card feeling less like an actual modal card, and more of an over-curved draw action that has a chance of whiffing, which will feel bad when it does. I think I'd prefer it if the extra card draw was changed to a different effect, one more in line with the damage mode of the card balance-wise, since I do think this is a very cool design, but I think right now the payoffs you get are not where they should be. Venom Coil Magus is definitely something. The Magus is able to poison 2 units immediately, and can activate poison manually with its active. This helps speed up the lethality of poison, fixing one of its core problems. However, this isn't mined for some reason? I can understand wanting to branch out the poison mechanic to other affinities, but starting with a payoff like this feels very awkward. Also, the card feels like it could have an extra stat point, since right now it feels very weak at the moment. Grave Spirit is a nice piece of support for graveyard-focused decks. A 1-mana 2/1 that mills 3 on summon is a really good rate for this type of effect, especially in the new standard. The on-mill effect, while currently hard to activate, is also really nice for filling up your graveyard. Even if right now it's a bit hard to utilize, Grave Spirit would fill a very useful niche for a lot of decks. Not too much to say here, just a very solid card. Renleaf Ransomer is a neat form of disruption for strength decks. This can be used in a way similar to Neon Canine Trails, where you play it on turn 2 to lock out your opponent from playing on curve. This is also useful against decks with low mana curves, such as aggro, since changing a 1 cost into a 2 cost is a much bigger bump than changing a 7 cost into an 8 cost, for example. However, I think these factors might make the card a bit too good at its job, at least at 2 mana. I think if this was scaled up to a 3-drop, it would be a bit more in line with the type of cards that it's trying to emulate due to how much more flexible the actual disruption effect is. Honestly, I'm not too stoked looking at the subreddit, but I do think there is some potential. While there may be some cards that are repeating commonly made design mistakes, such as Glitter Diver and the Powerverse Posse, we do have some cards that do provide very interesting concepts, but just need a little bit of tuning, such as Wind and Thunder and Redleaf Ransomer. I think if those cards get some small changes and are resubmitted, I would be very happy to seeing those be added to the major card pool. Now, before I wrap up today's episode of the Wanderstar Report, I just have to say that the voting period for Collective's 3rd card back competition is officially underway. In the description, you will find a link to a Google Form sheet where you can both view and vote on each of the 23 card back submissions. Of course, I now will be dedicating a bit of time on this show to showing off each of these submissions, where you can maybe give your own thoughts in the comments, along with your thoughts in the Google Form sheet. So, without further ado, time for me to show off those card backs. And that marks the end of today's episode of the Wanderstar Report. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. I would love to hear what the people think so I can improve my content for you, the viewer. In the description, you can find many helpful links related to Collective, such as how to get the game and how to learn more about it. I look forward to seeing you all next week. This is Acoustic, signing off.